We're well out of the grim health impact of COVID-19, but the effects of the 2-year pandemic on business and leadership decisions remain. We all know how much businesses, whether micro, small, medium, or large, have had to make tough decisions around employment, space, expansion, investment, and so much more to thrive in a tough environment. While there's a positive outlook for steady recovery and return to normalcy, Uganda is currently in a bit of a liquidity squeeze. So again, business leaders are faced with decisions that require some tightening of the belt. But can leaders do this with compassion? The idea behind this series is that while challenges and suffering are unavoidable, resilience is possible through compassion. Businesses and those they support, both employees and customers, can thrive via compassionate leadership. I'm Paul Busharizi, and this is Compassionate Leadership. Let me start with you, Hajat Zaujja. Schools were the hardest hit in COVID, in the lockdown. Before that, we thought schools were a sure deal, and then for 2 years, you were shut down. What was the challenge of getting back into business?
It was indeed a shock, I must admit, Paul. And schools and generally the education sector, we were more hit than any other sector because, like you have mentioned, we ran down for 2 years without doing anything. So our challenges were the finances, first of all, because business had closed and
You're not collecting school
we were
fees.
not collecting school fees. Then two, the human resource, maintaining our workers, being especially in the private school, where we do everything for ourselves, unlike our counterparts in the government schools. So maintaining workers, teachers, and all staff members was a big challenge. But also the school plant, the school infrastructure, because everybody had gone and taking care of them, security, electricity, some of these things we really needed to have them. But this was a time when there was actually no bill. So it was really a challenge.
So government says schools are going to reopen next week. Okay, maybe they gave us a time or a month. Yeah. So what are you beginning to do? What were you?
We really need to recollect ourselves. We really needed to check on our people, whether they are still with us, the teachers, for example, and the workers, whether they would really come back. So we really needed to find out whether our parents are still bringing back children to the schools. We really needed to see whether our suppliers are still willing to give us items on credit. We really needed to see whether our bankers are still willing to move the journey with us. So we had to look at so many things, and remember that time we were given so many guidelines that we would follow to work on the standard operating procedures. So the furniture wasn't enough, the money wasn't there, the children, we were not sure, the parents were not working, so we were not also sure they would bring back the children. And the teachers themselves, because you would bring the children, but you're not sure whether you really have the teachers and other workers.
I'm sure we shall come back to you about how we will handle, especially the teacher part, because that kind of speaks to our subject of today, leading with the heart. But let me come to you, Dr. Kimbowa. At NSSF, you have the biggest, possibly the biggest data bank of employees in the country. What did you learn coming out of these 2 years about how they coped, or their employers? What were you seeing at NSSF?
Thanks very much for the question. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of the Compassionate Leadership Series. The crisis, by its very nature, comes with it a number of lessons to learn. The very first realization when we had COVID was that, first of all, humility is going to be the new leadership rule. The acceptance that there were things that we were very sure of about COVID, but there were many things that we didn't know. So we weren't very sure there were going to be very many variants as they happened to be. We weren't very sure how long the close down was going to be. And we didn't even then fathom the enormity of the impact of this COVID on our revenue. We didn't know how it was going to impact our servers. We had no idea exactly how it was going to influence our structures in the organization, including the culture of the organization. So we didn't know. Then the other realization that we got immediately COVID struck, and even during the time, was that imagination was better than knowledge. The capacity to creatively work around the limitations and restrictions and keep the business going. And our team at the NSSF came up with 4 plans. The first one was what you would call the emergency response plan, which was now domiciled within what we called the COVID-19 crisis committee or team. So there was emergency response and monitoring that in accordance with the directives the president was giving. Then the third one was the fact that there is no Mr. Know-it-all, except Mr. Learn-it-all.
For the bank, is always a tightrope you're walking. Collecting, you collect money, deposits, and you lend it out. And you make sure you get those monies back because you have to, these guys have to come back and find their money there. Walking that tightrope during this time, give us an indication of how it was, of these guys have lent them money, who is telling me lies that his business is so much trouble that I can't collect, and who can that tightrope?
So again, it was, the uncertainty of it was, I think, the most unsettling, because initially we thought, it's a 3-month thing. So let's just extend loans for 3 months. 3 months will be good. 3 months became 6 months, 18 months, 24 months. And what was important was to talk to our customers. Even during the lockdown, we had to schedule calls and talk to our customers. What is happening? How are you doing business? For the schools, of course, those were shut down. We could only call to say hello at best. And luckily as well, the central bank supported in the extensions, because otherwise we could have wanted to help but be in breach of the guidelines. But the industry came together and regularized what would have been out of law, because those extensions, having more than 2 extensions, you become an NPL automatically. Now there was a period that the central bank said, okay, there's an amnesty here. You can support your customers within that amnesty. But also difficult conversations like our businesses generally don't have reserves. Just like we individuals went through our savings in a week and realized that actually, if this thing goes on for too long, we shall have no food. In fact, some people did get to that point, and there was a lot of social support, communities coming together and say, who in our community can we support? God was gracious to us that food was cheaper and things like that. But for the bank, we had to talk to our customers more. Then as we were coming out of COVID, then now the amnesty is ending, then you have to have the hard conversation. Will you survive? Survive. Should I put in Paul's money? Or can we look at the assets that you have, recapitalize the business? And these are particularly difficult conversations for us Ugandans, because we love our assets. We love our biapa. The customer will actually tell me, I have my biapa, you give me money, don't worry. And I'm like, no, this time why don't we flip it? That chapa, can it come out, sell it, recapitalize into your business, you get back, and another 2 years, be able to get that asset back, hopefully. Because it's this business that actually gave you that asset. Now remember, the economy as well had hyperinflation. So even as we're coming out of COVID, there were other economic problems. So it's been the last 2-3 years have been those that have tested us as bankers to go beyond the rule book. You were told this is the rule book, but now the circumstances before you are different. And this has been your good customer for 20 years. So it's not that they are willingly in the wrong place. It is
I mean, a question comes to mind, and I think I'll pass it to all of you. it seems to me that you had to better know your people, not only your staff, your clients, or in your case, maybe the parents and the students and your. Before COVID, you could look at a balance sheet and get a sense of the business. Clearly now, you probably are better people from the experience of COVID.
Oh, yeah.
Haja.
It was really a self-auditing time. It was a check. And I want to assure you that if there are people who still did not take lesson from the COVID experience, especially those doing business, then it was wrong. But even before I get to those ones who are doing business, the people individually, like Emma said, 1 week down the road, you've been earning salary for the past few years, but 1 week down the road, you somehow do not have food and you're already crying. You cannot pay for rent. You cannot, So it was really a big challenge and a learning period. And surely we have to do things in a different way.
Dr. Kimbowa, we don't normally think of NSSF as a business, but are you a better businessman? Are you a better business from the experience of COVID?
Yeah, I think so. I think NSSF graduated from just being a business, and COVID made us embrace something new. That is profit, or what you would call a purpose before profit. So it's a more purposeful business that is going beyond money to create broader value in society. So again, that was really sparked off by the COVID, the need now to look inside ourselves a little more as human beings, and also look around ourselves and then look at the business ahead. If you recall, the president said something, I'm not very sure what for us we took is what he meant. I think the president said, well, from now on, only those people who are providing essential services will be getting to the road. Those ones who are not in the category of essential services, stay home. This is translated directly to how relevant you are in the economy. If right now you hold a degree which is not in the category of essential services, then you realize again it's a wake-up call. Then during this COVID, I better study. According to the count, the number of people who were taking online courses before March 2020 were 1.3 million people around the world. By the March 2021, there were 14 million around the world. So that means there was heavier uptake. Now, at the fund, our staff engagement rose from 80 to 90. Why? Because there was more direct engagement now, one-on-one with the staff. Those who are working from home, those who are at headquarters, who are very few, but especially those who are at home. Our managers developed a new system called PIES. PIES is an abbreviation of how physically fit are you now? What about intellectually, emotionally, and also spiritually? That's why it is called PIES. How are your PIES? So every meeting that was online would start with that. What are your PIES? And also managers will be required to report on the hours they have been with their teams, one-on-one, but also as a group. So there was heavy engagement with staff during this time, which is a mark of empathy coming out of this compassionate leadership. That business is all about thinking about the people who make business real. And we also realize that pinning up the values and mission statement and all this on the walls, it means nothing unless you can actually practice it.
We're going to go to a break at this point. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion on leading with heart in our compassionate leadership series. Welcome back from the break. I'm going straight into our topic of leading with heart in the compassionate leadership series. But just getting back into our discussion, I'm coming to you straight, Emma. All these nice, soft things you're doing for the human being, we appreciate now, we better appreciate the whole person because of COVID. How did it play on the financial statements of businesses?
So there were, I'd bucket them in two groups. There were things we had to do for our people internally. For example, we created our own isolation center. The first lot we sent to Mulago, we struggled a bit. So we, with the permission of Ministry of Health, created our own isolation center. It was expensive, but actually saved lives. Because there was also the psychological side of things. And whereas that was expensive and could have been looked at as a cost, it gave the rest of the team confidence that in case something happens, I will be well taken care of. And therefore, we were able to serve our customers. Remember, our front-end staff through COVID were out there in the branches serving customers. And psychologically, they needed to know that there's a risk I will get COVID. And if I do, I will be well taken care of. And therefore, you could then show up and serve. So there were those things which were a cost, yes, but in the long term, they meant that we were more present and therefore more productive and therefore able to make the shareholder requirement. But there are also savings that we made during COVID. We didn't have as many cocktails, we didn't fly anywhere, training became online. And that became a lot cheaper. So we were able to then repurpose those resources to be able to do transport for our staff, to be able to provide meals because now they couldn't go out and get meals. So I think there was a bit of a balance there. On the customer side as well, the process of recovery was taking longer than normally did, and which means that you took more hours on one particular customer to try and nurse them back to health. So there was obviously then a cost because there are only so many people. So there was a cost on growth because you needed to focus on the ones you have to try and understand, the rules that we had learned didn't quite work. So for example, you'd have to sit with Hajat and say, okay, what if the schools don't come back? The children don't come back. Okay, so let's take a 50% scenario. Then we go back and say, okay, 50%. Then we need to make the loan longer so that you can be able to survive, which means I wouldn't have the time to go and look for another school. I needed to first nurse these ones that I have back to health, which was a time constraint, but it was better to stabilize the ship and then you can start looking at growth.
Then you sail smoothly. Stabilizing the ship first, you'd be sure that you'd sail smoothly and reach the destination safely.
Survival first, then profit later. No survival.
No profit.
But Hajat, let me come to you and also dealing with your people. What did you do differently? So for example, you talked about earlier that you are not even sure that the teachers would be there. And you're a private school, so you would not, you tell us, but I imagine you will not cover their costs while they are not teaching. What did you do differently then that you were not doing before to keep, even to just keep your teachers hopefully?
I did more calls than ever before to each and every teacher. Just to make them feel I'm working with them, I'm aware of what they are going through. I have a school truck, so the trucks were able to move. They were permitted to move around. So I would visit physically these teachers, these workers. No, they're with the driver. Of course, when you have the driver, these are cars that were allowed to move. So I would visit them physically. Then also talking to them. We had those who fell sick, and at worst, we even had those who passed on. But what did it mean to me at that time? If there's any one person who would stand up from his or her comfort home during COVID to go and be with these people, or even hire an ambulance to take the dead person to wherever they were going to be buried, then it would be me. Because I knew now if there's only one person that has to go to move with this ambulance, to move with these people, then it had to be me. Of course, like we say, leadership is not only about comfort, but you have to test those heartbeats as well to really show that you are part of them. You feel with them, you sympathize with them. Compassionate leadership. They were Stanbic. So you work with them. It's very difficult, very difficult. Today, if there is any social event or any problem, I don't even mind. I don't have to be there because I know everybody will be there. But that time, it was a time when you really had to go an extra mile. Yes, Paul.
Okay, let me come to Dr. Kimbowa. These were unprecedented times. I think that you cannot even overstate that. Which rule books have been thrown out the window and you're not using anymore?
Number one, I think, was the time for work from 8 to 5. That number one was removed completely. We also did something else that was to do what we call you have 2 days at home, then you move 3 days at the office. So whichever it is, there will be one day when everybody will be in the same place. They will have to be that day. So then there's something else we also started doing at the fund, the celebration of innovation and creativity, allowing people, whichever level they are in the organization. There was an initiative called Step Challenge for staff. So while it appeared like it's playful and fun, it was very competitive, but generating ideas that will enable us to create, capture, and deliver value for our savers. So we built the kind of internal competition and getting people to think and work so that they avoid the depression of lockdown. Then the other thing that happened was a kind of a twist in our culture around the, you are not following our orders really, no, but we are inviting you to co-create. You know, I think NSSF could probably be the only institution at the moment in the country which may not quite require a degree for one to get a job in the fund. And that's very similar to, as you know, Paul, companies like Google, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, a degree is not a requirement. And they make it very clear. Safaricom now, I think Equity Group and others. So the biggest on the stock exchange in Nairobi, again, a degree is not required. So what is the requirement is conversation in the fund is around what is the challenge that you have been able to figure out, which we have not figured out. Tell it to us. Then the other thing is give us some solutions. How are you going to solve them? And the impact it will cause to our revenue, the impact it will cause to our own internal staff engagement and processes, but also stakeholder management, especially the savers. So the issue is, while the lockdown meant to be lockdown, it didn't mean stand still. No, people had to intellectually engage more and compete with ideas within the fund. So the rule book, no. But like I mentioned earlier on, Mr. Know-it-all, no. It's learn, keep learning. They are continuous learning. So that is, those are the kind of rule book. A new influence, emphasis on influence other than raw power. The distinction is it's now more of engagement. A leader ceases to be a cop, a policeman, but he becomes both, a cop and a coach. So you catch me not doing right, I don't want you to point out just the mistake for its sake. Give me an idea of how I could have done it well and how it can benefit others. So that is one rule book, one of the rules that changed. Then the other one was, I would rather work with you and leave a fingerprint rather than a fist. And that is punishing when you make a mistake. No, let me pick more from you. So the whole thing about compassionate leadership actually, in changing the rules where we putting people at the center of corporate purpose, putting people at the very center. Because everybody is endowed with the different skills. And quite our education system doesn't allow us to discover the innate abilities that you have within you. No. So the lockdown enabled us to look for these innate skills people have.
Emma, it might be too early, maybe. Who knows? Maybe it's already a good time to evaluate. But does it pay to be a nice guy, to be a compassionate leader, given?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I'll tell you why. We're the largest bank in the market,
And maybe before we were proud to be the largest bank in the market, but what we learned through COVID was to use that position to rally others for a cause. Then being the largest started to make impact. So for example, when we were looking for oxygen cylinders, it was easy then to rally the whole region to get, oxygen cylinders. We thought about how do SACCOs bounce back after COVID, because people had basically eaten their savings. We were able to get funding that helped us we're still funding SACCOs at 10 and 12% because we were able to get funding that will allow us to do that. We thought about women, and were able to attract, again, IFC to come and support us to start our women's proposition, so that we can start to use our influence, like PK says, in the wider, not only for ourselves, but also to rally others to come and support the causes that we are excited about. When we started a mother's maternal health project, and we've rallied all the women leaders, CEs in this market, to get their organizations to come and support Kawempe Hospital and other health centers with all kinds of equipment. So it does pay to be the good person, because then you can get more people to be good.
Does it show up on the financial statement that you're a better person?
Absolutely, purpose.
Maybe, PK, I come to the last question. Maybe even the way we measure business success has changed. It's no longer about the bottom line, or I don't know, maybe we will go back to that time, or?
No, I think the metrics have changed. I do know, let me go back to Stanbic a little bit, just a little bit where Emma has left off. And then I come to the metrics, measuring the border people who bank with the Stanbic Bank. And this is a very, very clear testimony of compassion leadership. Now you have this border guy who has been carrying people, and the people are not there to carry. Then he starts now, he's repurposing the border he has. And he is able to go to a bank, Stanbic, and pick some money and bring it to the home and take it to different people. For those who can use the mobile payments, they use that platform. But a number of these border people were saying, no, we can now do courier service in the village. So they buy groceries from people in the market, deliver it in the home. But then they are also able to figure out other things that you need. That's empathy now. They step into your boots and you figure out, but I saw they were preparing for birthday for a kid here. They would need a cake, they would need this, they would need it. So he proposes. Some of the families didn't know where to get certain provisions. Border people knew. And they totally repurposed their businesses. If Stanbic Bank was to honestly tell us the figures, you'll find that border people in that category, the amount of money they were banking during that time rose a little more for repurposing. But it came out of what? Compassion. Yeah, imagining what other people would need. Now, coming to the question around how do we measure the success? Yes, today in business, real success is also redefined. What does success mean? Success is value you deliver beyond the numbers. So it's value. It's value. What value do you create for people? How many people do you make happy? Absolutely. How many people do you make happy? Yeah, you have a delivery policy to have make sure that women are more in the organization, that we have proper lighting and ventilation in the organization, and people put a smile on their faces, that you provide adequate drinks and food, make them accessible and create a convenient environment. You now talk to people with respect, and trust, and you make people feel that this is their new home. Not the time when most of us started working, and so you would see every morning you are going to office like you are going to some kind of something. So the happiness and the sense of family the people have in the place of work is much more enhanced today. The community values, the sense of community in the home. There is somebody who's going to ask me about my pies. and so on. So that is real success. It's your happiness. You heard the story of the World Bank guy who was asking a fisherman somewhere in South America, isn't it? That's the real definition of happiness. I don't want to bring so much fish. Why? Because I'm happy. Yes, I'm already having fun and so on. So to me, I think inclusion, diversity, and the sense of well-being in a
sense of being valued,
an environment where you are valued, and respected. That's the real measure of success.
We are better realizing that now.
Yes.
But maybe all of you should.
And Paul, this really breeds high productivity. Okay, motivation. It breeds productivity.
This is the last question for all of you. We're going to answer all of you. So isn't it sad that it took a disaster to bring us to this point where we better appreciate our workers, our clients, the people? Isn't it sad?
Yes. Well, I'm not very sure whether it's sad or it's the law of nature. That, or even the law of nature, maybe even the will of God, that for us to be comfortable and knowing that we have achieved or we are going to enjoy salvation, somebody had to die and he sacrifices blood and so on. I think a crisis always is a wake-up call. That's why we talk about University of Hard Knocks, that you have to knock your head first and then you realize that it's something has to. So there is a lot that happens in life which causes a transition. Before Promised Land, from Egypt, you have to go through the desert, and transformation takes place. So transformation does not take place in peacetime. Transformation does not take place in a situation where there is comfort.
So, isn't it sad that we have to go through bad times?
I'd rather look at it that it's good we took the opportunity. We could have missed it. We could have missed it. And I think the one thing that kept me going is never let a good crisis go to waste. So it's important that we took the learning, the growth, the change, the transition. Otherwise, we could have missed it. And maybe some people missed it.
Yeah. Hajat.
And yes, Paul, and Nelson Mandela said that a real leader uses every issue, no matter how serious and sensitive, okay? No matter how serious and sensitive, to ensure that at the end of the day, you emerge stronger than never before. So some of these circumstances, when the challenges come, they really shape us into better and stronger leaders. So I don't know whether you judge it as having been unfortunate that we had this bad experience that trained us. I leave that to you, Paul.
On that note of turning lemon into lemonades, we have to bring this episode to a close. Thank you very much, Dr. Kimbowa, for being with us. Hajat, Zaujja, for being with us. Emma, thank you all. I've been Paul Busharizi, your host. Until the next time, when we discuss another facet of compassionate leadership, we'll see you then.